Hello, we are coming to you live 30 feet underground where none of the birds can see us because all the birds work for the bourgeoisie. This is Carson.
And this is Austin.
And we're the Unelectoral College.
Today's episode, the Metal Birds and MAPs. We will be discussing drones with a statement from Robert Chappie, MAPs, and the new culture that's sweeping the nation, unfortunately enough.
Working from home. So today we're going to be talking, just before we start, about...
We usually record on Saturdays. We have our agenda and our schedule figured out by Thursday for the most part. So that leaves Friday where things can happen that can influence our show. And yesterday, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, one of the associate judges on the Supreme Court, tragically passed away after battling cancer on and off for the past decade. She was on the court for 13 years. And at this point, it's a pretty bad time for everybody.
Yeah, thoughts and prayers go out to her family and loved ones, of course, and anybody who needs that assistance because of the loss of a loved one. But of course, this only doesn't have, emotional repercussions. This also has a lot of political repercussions because of the job and career she was in. Austin, what are you thinking right now?
And right now, we're at a very, 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 very divisive time in our politics with how split everyone is. And now, one of the judges on the highest court in the land has passed away, and Donald Trump might be appointing another justice before his term ends in November.
Yep. It looks very likely. Mitch McConnell says he's going to push it through. A lot of judges who said this wouldn't or a lot of representatives, I should say, who said this wouldn't happen have been silent as of now. Lindsey Graham, Ted Cruz, most of them aren't really talking too much about some of this stuff. And of course, Trump is probably full send on the issue.
And you figure if this obviously goes against what Mitch McConnell said in 2016, I believe it was, before the nuclear option. We'll talk about that in a minute. But he would mention that we should not be electing new Supreme Court justices during an election year. And obviously this would go against it. And with the nuclear option, which was introduced by Democrats in 2016, they don't need the supermajority, which would be a large portion of the votes in the court. They just need 51, which, since Republicans have control over the Senate, I believe they have 54 in the Senate. In order for this not to pass, they would need 4 Republican representatives to cross that line. The ones that would most likely would be Mitt Romney. I don't remember her name.
Susan Collins.
There's another one who said that she would not be voting the judge in already.
But the issue with those people as swing voters is...
you need all 4 of them.
There's that as the main concern, but there's also post and pre-election. Come November 5th, 6th, and 7th, after the election is already done and the election results are counted, the Republicans at that point have nothing to lose. A lot of these people who are on the fence are only on the fence because they might lose their election. But if they've already lost their election, or if they just won an election for another 6 years, at that point, who cares? So they might try to push a judge through the end of November, even though they'll say right now they won't.
And I wanted to get your take on this, because I'm not super engrossed in the affairs of the Democratic Party. But to my knowledge, there's a fair size of Bernie Sanders supporters who were ousted and are only going for Biden due to the idea that if they don't, Trump will be electing another Supreme Court nominee in 2021 or 22. With that pretty much off the table now, since it can happen now, that might take away... How much do you think that would affect this upcoming election for these?
See, I think it's a voter encourager for the Democrats, because if the Senate Democrats can filibuster and successfully stall the process, even though they don't have the majority of votes, they can draw out the process. If they can do that successfully, or they, just keep pointing at hypocrisy, I think that emboldens the Democrats' base. And I think we should still be fearful, because if Trump does win another term, Clarence Thomas is now the oldest justice on the court. He was born in the 1940s. He's approaching his mid-70s. 4 years from now, the man is going to be very old and he might be thinking of quitting also. And 4 years, if he gives up or somebody has some sort of random health issue, Trump could get a fourth appointment, and that is extremely dangerous.
And that hasn't happened
ever.
Since
at least not
Nixon.
in the 500 years, yeah.
Yeah. Nixon was the last to be able to do something like that. And that's still kind of today. That's still felt today.
Yeah.
For better or for worse.
If you look at the Supreme Court, the modern one that, we've spent most of the 2000s living with, Reagan appointed a bunch of justices, and now Trump's appointing a bunch of justices. The majority of the court for the past 40 years has been controlled by two presidents. And that's extremely scary, especially since two of those politicians share a lot in common politically and ideologically. The divide of the court after Trump's new appointment is very lenient towards the conservative ideology.
And that's what I was going to mention. Right now, like pre-Ruth Bader Ginsburg's passing, it was roughly 5-4 leaning conservative. You have, I can't remember his name off the top of my head.
Chief Justice Roberts.
Who's fairly in between, but still leans conservatively. You figure if Trump puts that new justice in by October, November, even December, because he doesn't have to be in office, or he doesn't have to be in the election cycle to elect this judge. It could be December, and he could still push him through.
Mm-hmm.
And if Trump loses, I think that's a big sign that he's going to be trying to push this justice through as his last kind of dying breath.
Yep.
He's going to shove this justice into the court and then swing it 6-3 conservatively.
Yep. And, even Chief Justice John Roberts, as much as he tries to swing, that's a hard balance to try to keep with 6-3.
Even if you're the individual, that's still 5-4.
Yep. Even if he swings, he loses.
Right.
Which really changes the makeup of the court.
It's a very tough thing to overcome, especially with the Republicans controlling the Senate. It's tough to... And McConnell, Senator Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, as well as Donald Trump, packing these lower-level courts with Republican judges already. It's very tough to see liberally ideological cases make it all the way through. And if one of the justices of the Supreme Court goes red now, a new one, Ted Cruz even...
Yeah.
Who knows what would happen there.
And the conservative ideology has always been very good at running a court system. Looking to the controversy of abortion, that has been one of their huge issues with the court. If you look in recent history, and I'm only talking 2-3 years ago, Ohio passed a 6-week heartbeat bill, which was declared unconstitutional. But they did that same similar bill in different states. And those different states went and got different opinions from circuit courts. And the idea was that if enough states pass this type of abortion ban and enough courts make different opinions, the Supreme Court has to hear it, which now has 3 Trump people on it. So strategically speaking, they not only have the judges on the lower courts and the upper courts, but they also have the ground game to create the controversy to allow the Supreme Court to see something.
Right, and I'm conservative, so this benefits me, I guess, if you want to think of it that way. I personally am in the opinion that the Supreme Court should not be ideologically biased. Obviously, that's impossible in our climate. You're not going to find a man without bias anywhere. And to see the court come down with not only bias, but an overwhelming bias, potentially, here in not even half a year, it's pretty scary to think about, even if it is on my side.
But, don't get too worried yet. There's a lot of things that can develop. We haven't heard who Trump's pick would be yet. There's still Lindsey Graham, who is silent. It's an evolving story, and more things will come out of it.
Yeah, we're only reporting this the day after it happens, not even 24 hours since this happened, because it happened
last night,
6:30ish, I believe.
Yeah.
I got the call right at the pings. So, who knows? It's not the end of the world. Don't be too concerned.
Yeah.
Even if Trump goes gung-ho and throws this justice in, it's not going to destroy the world. Yet.
There's a lot of potential there, but it's an evolving story, so we won't go too much into it. So we will go ahead and start our main story today, which is going to be discussing drones. Robert Shaby is unable to be with us today, but Robert Shaby is a recent graduate from our college at Youngstown State University. With his graduation, he did his capstone on drones and drone warfare. And there's a lot of interesting things to go through with that. Taking a statement from him through his capstone, I will read some of his conclusions that he came to through his research. His research was primarily on the effectiveness of drone warfare and should Congress be able to control said drone warfare and some of the negative consequences that come out of this drone warfare. So, beginning the reading, the weighing of the security against liberty has been a constant discussion in not only the United States, but much of the world. Our new methods of defense bring with them new consideration in that debate. It should be recognized that this debate does not just belong in the realm of academic and politicians, but it should be taking place among everyday people. How your nation acts through the world is something that every American voter should consider when they step into the voting booth. The largest military power in the world is ultimately one that serves them if they so choose to step up and give their input at the polls. They can't elect generals and admirals, but they can choose the commander-in-chief and members of Congress who do have an impact on military affairs. Even if Congress does lack the authority to take truly meaningful action on the issue of drone strikes, the American people should continue to fight to ensure that their government is using these new weapons in a way that we can all stand behind. And that is the major statement he came to at the conclusion of his research. Some particular aspects to note is that he does not believe Congress has the authority to take executive order drone strikes away from the president, allowing the president to use unrestricted drone warfare. He also cites that drone warfare has negative effects, creating more terrorists possibly, based off of their use. Of course, there's the controversies of missing targets and bombing high schools and medical facilities. But the conclusion he comes to is that the American people need to be more involved and educated on this issue, so that is why we will be discussing it.
I'm still here. Excellent narration.
Thank you.
The first thing I wanted to bring up was actually that first line. I want to talk a bit, not as necessarily as drone as like the military scourge that it is, but weighing security against liberty. And with the new drones, obviously they're able to commit surveillance at an unprecedented scale. What do you think? How far would you be willing to go with this in terms of security? How much would you sacrifice?
See, drones are very, very scary. To me, because we have used drones. There was a man named Alawi, I believe. I'm not getting that pronunciation right, I know for sure. But he was in Osama bin Laden's kind of cabinet. He was an American-born citizen. And we killed him in a drone strike. Security versus our liberties. Does an American, natural-born American citizen who has the rights of the Constitution, does he have the right not to be drone striked? I mean, it's a funny way of phrasing it, but that is a legitimate concern.
Your message.
Yeah. So I don't know. Drone normal kind of security for liberty, I think, is a good trade-off. But once we start getting into the realm of this extreme techno-science, the liberties become so much more important.
And harder to protect.
Yeah, if we were talking 1960s, I would probably say that you could trade liberties for security. But since we're talking 2020, where they can record our entire conversation on our phones, and
well, we're doing that for them.
We are doing that for them. But
it's over America.
They got us. But yeah, they can just do whatever they want.
Right. One of the things as well I want to mention involving the right to not be drone strikes, I feel like that's something that kind of, even if you're a natural-born American citizen, I feel like, I don't want to say you lose the right, but I feel like when you're joining Al-Qaeda, or I say even ISIS, I feel like a lot of those rights and liberties should kind of be pushed aside. I want to mention, I believe it was a New Mexico woman. I'm not sure which state exactly, but somewhere around there who flew to wherever to join ISIS, and she wanted to come back, and we just said no.
So that's a really interesting issue because the current law of the United States says that if an American citizen joins a enemy state, they lose their rights as an American citizen. But technically,
Not a state.
it's not a state because the United States never recognized it as a state. So where's the kind of line there?
Yeah.
Because it's not working with a state, it's working with a private entity, more or less.
Right. And compared to other like sovereign states, ISIS and Al Qaeda, they're probably worse than a lot of good states that you can go to, huh?
Yep.
So, is it fair to take away these liberties from these people who are sacrificing their future almost for this terroristic future?
And you know, I'm a big believer in softness on crime. I don't really know how to say it. I believe people can be reformed. So like this woman did leave and join ISIS and did probably atrocious things for them, and she should probably face some sort of charges for her crime, but at the end of the day, does committing one crime justify the destruction of your entire life? Should she be able to reform and be forgiven?
I feel like if it was a singular act, like let's say I killed you right here in this podcast booth.
Oh, damn. Got me.
That's the last of it. It's an episode. But if I killed you here, I feel like that's different than me flying overseas, being recruited to kill many of you.
That's a fair point.
Rather than just say... Because I feel like if I'm joining a terrorist organization, I kind of know what I'm getting into. And we kind of knew what we were getting into when we move to our next topic in a little bit.
Yeah.
That's a little bit of a...
That's a good story for...
foreshadowing. That'd be used in a good movie. Wasn't used in that one.
But there's a bunch of things that like are completely like weird with drones, and that's just one of the examples that comes up with it. You know, going to Robert's research, particularly Austin, what do you think? Should we like make some amendments to allow Congress to have drone authority, or is it like completely okay to allow the president to act?
Have sole power over
Yeah.
it. I feel like one of the things that I would like is for these large organized drone strikes.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, when it comes to the nuclear button, we have the president has to hit the button, and then we need, I believe it's the 3 other officers to all agree on it to push the button. I feel like it would be nice to have that. Not necessarily on like the wide scale like the Senate, but just another second opinion other than just, all right, we're going to send drones to here. And then it would be Trump would just be like, go ahead. I feel like we need a little more than just like one person deciding it.
I would agree with that. Yeah, it's just kind of weird, you know, because like we don't have the same kind of authority with the president for other types of warfare.
I feel like it's too easy to mess up a drone strike. We mentioned location earlier, to just have one person to be like, ship it, and then send thousands of drones overseas.
And if Robert's research is true, drone strikes have some possibility of causing more terrorists. Because part of what the terrorist doctrine says is it's a specific type of Islam where it says dying in combat is, you know, rewarded. But is it really combat if you aren't fighting anybody?
Right, and that's kind of the weird future of neo-war, where we're not really fighting people overseas anymore. We're sitting in a room not too different from our podcast room, controlling these little metal birds, you know?
Back to the title.
Back to the title. The metal birds, they're here.
And they work for the bourgeoisie.
It just feels like it's an entirely like proxy-based warfare at this point, where you'll never know who your enemy is. You know like who they are. You'll know like what they're working for, but you don't know. You'll never see your enemy.
Mm-hmm.
And that's such a strange concept to think about.
And I think that's really scary because, you know, as awful as PTSD is, PTSD acts as a deterrent to war. if you are incapable of killing somebody, if killing somebody causes all of these atrocious things to happen to you mentally, people see that and they're like, oh, damn, killing people is bad. But if we use drones,
it feels like you can have
it's like a video game.
It's not like I'm doing it, you know?
Yeah,
like, I feel like there's a lot of people who, if they had a gun, they would not be able to shoot a terrorist even in front of them.
No.
And if you just had a button, you had like a little remote control, yeah, it's easy enough.
If I was given a red button in this room and they said if you press that button it would kill a terrorist,
like, hey.
I think I could do it.
Oh yeah, easy.
But I do not think I could kill them.
I don't know. I could probably kill a man if I knew they were bad.
I'm
eyeing you up.
The man threatened my life like 5 minutes ago, and now he's doing it again.
I am a conservative. I approve the Second Amendment. I will shoot a terrorist in the face.
I mean,
challenge accepted.
Challenge accepted. Shoot.
Something not really political or warfare based that I want to mention that you at home might find interesting. If you're ever wondering how fast the future is coming, there's no better gauge than looking at drones that you can purchase, even from, say, Walmart. Because I remember when I started working for Walmart, like whenever I decided to start working for Walmart, March or sometime, the drones there were like this big. And I say this big to the microphone like it can see me, but I could hold it in my hand very comfortably. And then as the year progressed, the drones would be like the same price, get bigger, better. Some of them have cameras. It's crazy to the degree which the technology is evolving. And it almost like, what are these drones going to be like in 10 years? What kind of drones will we have? We could have drones that instead of in size are tiny. I could probably put it in my eye.
And the scary thing with this, especially with our current laws, because our laws do not keep up with technology in a lot of ways, is that in Ohio, I can't speak for all states, but in Ohio, it is a single consent state to be recorded. If I consent to you to be recorded in a video, that's all that matters. As long as it's a conversation you and me are having and I say it's okay, it doesn't matter what Austin says, because it's a single consent state. So what does drones with cameras and microphones do to the future of our country? Especially if like Amazon starts using them, or if the United States starts just using them for regular security. You can record a lot on those cameras. What will they see? What will they collect? Is that okay?
Right, I mean, what can you do? Let's say you're in your house, you look out the window, it's open, there's just a drone. What are you going to do?
Yeah.
It's recording you, you can't do anything about it. Who knows where it goes?
And if you have a license, that's all that's really required right now for drones, is that you get a license and you only fly
over
a certain
airspace.
Yeah, certain type.
You know what I think would be interesting? Going off topic, with drones and crime, I think it'd be very interesting if you committed a traffic felony, like say run a red light. That's like the lesser of all things. What if the traffic lights could dispense a drone and it followed the car? Wouldn't that be neat?
Yep, and then the cops could just come
follow the driver.
Yep.
Yeah.
They could follow you across the entire country.
That'd be pretty cool. I don't know what prompted that thought, but wow, that'd be an interesting thing, wouldn't it?
You should start writing for Black Mirror.
No, Black Mirror. Hit me up. I am a podcaster with one other episode. I can write your stories, Black Mirror. Trust me. So hear me out. There's a traffic light, and it spits out drones that follow people who run it, and they follow you wherever you go. They sacrifice your liberties for securities. Is there another thing you'd like to mention on the topic of these drones?
Probably the last thing that I would like to mention with drones is, in my opinion, I think the drone warfare is very dangerous because, one, it's one-sided warfare as of now. The United States has a full military advantage, and as much as I love this country, that just doesn't sit right with me that we can do and take these actions and people can't fight back in the same way. And then the other thing that scares me even more than that is that Iran has shot down drones and has been using it to create or attempt to create their own drone. And that's also extremely scary because as much as I don't want one-sided drone warfare, two-sided drone warfare is even more scary.
Right, because we've never really, outside of Pearl Harbor, we've never really been attacked on American soil, excluding Pearl Harbor, 9/11. We've never had, like, a situation where a civilian could be killed by a terrorist or an organization ever, almost. Like, for instance, a city has never fallen into enemy hands. Mm-hmm. Enemy troops have never made landfall on the shores of California.
Yeah. Or
even washed up in PA or somewhere stupid, like Maine. I'm just kidding, I love Maine. But the idea that someone in an AC-coated room, colder than this room, just slipping on some drink can move a drone and destroy any building they want. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah.
From halfway across the world.
Yeah. And there's almost nothing we can really do. Yeah. Especially if they make them very, like... Small, and they make them, like...
Fast.
The Walmart style. You could attach a bomb to one of those and, you know, you're just flying around. Nobody really notices. And
yeah.
It's a scary possibility.
It's just crazy how fast the drone technology is evolving and to how much of a degree it's taking our laws.
Yeah.
Where does it end?
And most of the drones that we talk about are just flying drones, but the military is always ahead of the American people. So going back to what Austin said, if you are amazed by the quantity of drones at Walmart, the United States military has one that is 3 times as good, guaranteed.
And weaponized.
Yep. And so the United States is working on not just flying ones, but they're working on sea ones. They're going to be working on tank drones. They're going to have drones for every type of warfare. And it's just a possible future.
And one good thing that's alright with drones that I like for military warfare is we really don't have to sacrifice soldiers at that point when we're just sending unmanned tanks, planes, boats, and like it's almost as is it a good thing that we're droning our entire army? Because it's deadly and it's
what happens
anywhere across the world. But
if China or some of these other countries develop very successful EMP technology, because then we don't have a military at all. That's also a scary possibility with drones as well. I honestly feel more comfortable with a military capability of the United States 40 years ago than I would with our modern military.
I like the idea of our modern military. I like the idea that we have this drone front, this faux front of unmanned weaponry. And if there is a way around it, like you said, China drops EMP, we have a military as well, just in reserve.
That's possible. But there's a bunch of different things to look into. There's a very good book I recommend by Sarah Krebs. It's just titled Drones. She is a drone specialist, one of the first in the field. It was published in 2015. I read it a couple years ago. Very good read. Talks about drones in all capacities if you want to learn more. And then, of course, Robert Shavy's thesis. We just read you the big conclusion piece there, but there is a lot further in-depth information that he goes through, and you can find some of that information also and get some more knowledge.
I love talking about the future and the past. Another off-topic thing, like, could you imagine we're having this discussion about drone liberty? What happens when they're starting to put cameras in people's eyes? Then what?
Talk to Elon Musk. He's working on it.
So what happens then? What if I'm filming you just by looking at you? You never know.
Never know.
You never know.
Speaking of the future, another concern we now have to examine in the future is the future.
Do not look at me with that smile.
It's the future of The Office.
Right. You got me worried.
Yeah, we have another surprise topic coming up at the end, and he thought I was talking about that.
Carson's got his fingers in my wind-up key. I'm the wind-up toy you get for Christmas, about to destroy the podcast booth. My crusade against I don't want to say a minority because that sounds very bad, doesn't it?
That sounds extremely bad, and you just got us canceled on YouTube.
No. A crusade against people who use their position in a unethical way,
Mm-hmm.
who try to hide what they are to make themselves seem better. It's like when we call a terrorist an American citizen. That's kind of what we're doing with that. But with American citizens comes the new age of COVID.
Mm-hmm.
We're living in it. It's tough to do anything in this world. You figure, we walked here, maybe a 15-minute walk, we saw nobody.
Nobody had to wear a mask
in.
Separate ourselves a little bit in the booth.
Yep, as far as we can. This booth is very small.
But a lot of the changes, we were filming this at a university. A lot of kids are doing their classes online.
I know, I as well. We have a special thing where we have these classes that are sometimes online, sometimes in person. But I had two classes that were all online. One wasn't, went to class first day, told us, it's going online. And then you figure I'm inside most of the time doing my classes at work. And how good is that for a developing mind? I feel weird saying that about myself, that I'm a developing mind, but I'm a college student. I'm learning.
And this whole setup is to bring us into the next topic we're talking about, which is the future of the workplace. It is an article published by The Economist, and it's titled "The Future of the Office: How COVID-19 Has Forced a Radical Shift in Working Habits," and that can also be included in study habits as well. Part of this article, their main argument is that people are genuinely happier working from home. They cite that there has been a general trend of working from home, or wanting to work from home at least for a couple years, even before COVID. They cite some studies where they say people are even more productive working from home than they are in the office. And they give both sides of the arguments to give it a little bit of a kind of nuanced, like academic reading kind of piece. But the simple fact of the matter is that their conclusion is that they think that this is going to be a permanent, or at least a semi-permanent change for the next generation.
For a lot of specific jobs, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I know, for instance, going back to Walmart, when I have to wake up for my shifts, I have to wake up much earlier because I have to drive out there.
Mm-hmm.
Or if I'm working from home, I could probably manage my sleep schedule a lot easier, Because rather than waking up, getting ready, driving to work, and you figure I save money on gas, I save money on food because I have to purchase food when I get there, I save my own time. There's really very few downsides to working at home compared to a desk job. Let's say, for instance, our podcast was a good example. We could probably do this from home if we had the same software.
Mm-hmm.
But
we're just not smart. We're not that smart.
Yeah, that's good. But it's really easy to work from home compared to having to go all the way out to work day in. And the biggest thing, I mentioned again, gas is expensive.
Mm-hmm.
And if I know my grandfather works, we live in a smaller town, and he works like an hour out in a bigger city. He works a desk job there, and he works from home as well, almost like in rotation, in a rota. Having to drive an hour to an hour back, what does that do for a person? Doesn't that suck?
Especially where we live here in Youngstown, Ohio, we can be considered a very far out suburb from Pittsburgh and Cleveland. A lot of people live in our area because the housing is super cheap, and then they drive an hour and a half to work in those major cities. That's a major cut of their productivity.
And one thing I would like to mention for those, like, you mentioned the new generation coming into this field where jobs are all digital. I think that'd be a great change as well for, say, me, because if I'm going into politics as a political face, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty much limited to Ohio because that's where I am. If we go all digital, who's to say I can't work in Nevada, Tennessee?
And there's virtual internships that do that now because I'm also a political person and I've seen some of them where you can live here. As a matter of fact, the Joe Biden campaign organizer for our area where we are right now, he lives in New Jersey. You know, he's not an Ohio guy. He's not even coming to Ohio. He's working from his bedroom in New Jersey, organizing a county that's 6-hour drive away from him.
And you can do that now. And it almost feels like COVID, I don't want to say is a good thing. COVID is a bad thing, but this is a good thing that has ushered forth the idea that maybe the workplace can be at home now. I remember seeing an article, this is not very politically important, that said like shirt sales are up and pant sales are down because nobody really, everyone's just working from their bed, working from a desk, at home, who cares?
Now, as much as I think this is important to society and I think this is moving us in the right track, there are a couple things that scare me, and I want to bring those up and see what you think here, Austin. People who don't have tech skills. We still have a lot of people in this country who are elder, who don't have the tech skills to be able to do this. We also have a lot of younger people who are impoverished, who don't maybe have the same tech skills as somebody who lives in a economically developed area. How is this going to affect them?
I think this really won't have too much of an impact on the elderly. As I mentioned earlier, this is more of a new generation thing for the next line of these workers. And I don't think it's really a thing that we're never going to be able to replace all jobs digitally. For instance, if I was going to say Walmart, but I want to be replaced from Walmart, so I'm going to use a different example. Let's say I'm just a teacher, for instance. You can obviously learn offline, but there's always going to be demand for in-person teachers.
I agree.
Like, I would rather go to a classroom and talk to my teacher and interact with that classroom setting rather than sit in a stupid Zoom call where I have to get pestered into playing my automaton because they can see it.
It's a phenomenal instrument. You are a master player.
I can play Ode to Joy
and
period.
Oh, well, that sucks.
And I can play Ode to Joy when I put my little instrument on the guide sheet and press the buttons when it says to press the buttons.
Shoot.
I play a mean one tone.
One tone, yeah, the high-pitched screech.
Yeah, my favorite one. That's how I was feeling earlier. But, and you mentioned for impoverished kids as well. Yes, and that's a tough thing to overcome. I feel like if we were going entirely digital, I feel like we would be installing these places where you can access computers a lot easier. Not like net cafes, but like places where...
Public libraries.
Right, pretty much. It wouldn't be you have to have your own computer, but if you work from a computer, there's a lot of different places you can go. Like obviously here, for instance, we don't have to show an ID card to come in and go to a computer.
That's true.
And I figure if I'm just typing up Excel sheets, I can come in here whenever I want and just be like, click, 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 and finish up my work, and then leave. What's next? You said you had more points.
That was the main one that concerned me. Most of these ones I don't think is the government's business, so like it's not really something we need to do anything about. But I think it's going to be interesting just to see kind of what happens to this happiness in the long term. Because I have seen studies where people with social media use become less happy. Well, what happens if you live your entire life online? And then the other one is, what about obesity rates?
Where you're just sitting in a chair?
I'm just sitting in a chair all day, working from home, not going out. That's going to be an interesting kind of thing. I can say personally for quarantine myself, I've gained a couple pounds.
I'm not sponsored, but I use Ring Fit Adventure to make myself look glorious. I weigh like 45 pounds. 50 pounds.
See, I'm not sponsored, but I use a lot of McDonald's. So.
And they're on campus.
It's a good trick. Highly recommend.
Yeah. I feel like it's nice to get in shape. That didn't come out the way I wanted it to come out. It is nice to get in shape. As I'd say, I feel like if you're working from home, you should find some measure that you enjoy to help keep yourself in shape. Like, you can run, you can do whatever. That's why I enjoy using Ring Fit Adventure, because it's a game, basically, that helps me exercise. And makes me want to sit down afterwards. And what else was I about to mention?
About happiness, probably.
Yes, about happiness is I'm not happy working from home every day.
Yeah.
I'm alright, but like, you figure when you have to drive out there, it changes up what you're doing. I feel like the monotony of wake up, digital, go to bed, almost. It feels very taxing. And the effects it can have on your body as well is, for instance, I play games on my computer all the time. I used to have bad migraines because of it. And I don't know if someone who has not been raised on this type of computer technology, if they suddenly are just staring at this computer screen for 7, 8 hours a day, every day, for the rest of their career, what would that affect their eyes, their like mental state, like their head?
I think the best kind of scenario for the world is going to be one where, like, you work 1 or 2 days a month, go into an office or meeting just to check up with a boss. Because, like, we need to have some, like, personal connection with supervisors, because I think that encourages productivity too. It's kind of hard to build those connections online. And I think that changes up the system just enough that I think it'd be perfect if you'd work like 2 days a month physically and the rest online. I think that would be a perfect society.
Like, and one additional point as well is I feel like if I was working from home, productivity, yeah, I feel like it'd be very nice to almost have my own schedule, like have a deadline, rather than waking up at 8, going to work at 9 and coming back at 5. Like, I can do my work 10 at like 3 p.m. and then finish it at like 8 p.m. I wouldn't have to be constrained to this one time as long as I meet the deadline, you know? Whereas if I'm sitting at a desk, I just have this next 8 hours. I feel like it helps a lot to be able to segment my work.
So just one quick thing, and then we'll move on to our final topic today. Just a quick yes or no. Do you agree with the Economist article? Do you think this is the future?
Yes.
I am also a yes.
I feel like it's something that I don't think would have became the future if it didn't happen first. I feel like we wouldn't be at home. Like, if it wasn't for COVID, I feel like we'd probably be like working from home. That would drop productivity, etc., etc. We wouldn't have this sample to go off of.
All right. And with that, we will move on to our final topic. And Austin is extremely excited, and he's been talking about it all week, and has been talking about it every time we've changed subjects this podcast. So lead it away.
So, before we begin on talking about MAP culture, I would like to mention and bring up LGBTQ struggles in the past 60 years. LGBTQ community has gone through a lot in the past 60 years, and one thing that I would like to point out in particular is the way they handled almost slurs. For instance, the word I want to bring up is the word queer. In the past, that word has been used derogatorily to demean these LGBTQ people, and now you figure that word is used in their culture. You can be gender queer, the Q in that LGBTQ, you know? There's a different group of people that are trying to get a word to be deemed, that they deem as a slur. They're trying to get it to be eradicated, almost. These people are pedophiles. They have been trying to crawl their way into the LGBTQ community by labeling themselves as MAPs, also known as minor attracted persons. They are not trying to, in the way that the LGBT community used queer, where they incorporated it to their society, the term pedophile, they're trying to hide it. They don't want to be called a pedophile because they know that's bad.
Mm-hmm.
They want to be called an MAP because if you're not familiar with, say, LGBTQ culture, if you hear someone say, like, oh, what's your sexuality? And they're like, I'm an MAP. You're like, okay, that's cool. But if you ask somebody, hey, what's your sexuality? And they're like, I'm a pedophile. That probably wouldn't be as okay. And Carson and I, pre-podcast, watched this movie called Mignons. It is a French film. You might know it a little better as Cuties.
It's available on Netflix.
It is on. Do not watch it on Netflix. Actually, the best argument I can give for this movie being a terrible movie is to tell you to watch the movie. I thought the movie was gonna be bad going in. You said you thought it'd be all right.
Yeah. So the article that jumped us on this
was an article from the New Yorker by Richard Brody. And in this article, he sort of puts it in this limelight, makes it look better than it is. You know, they cleaned up the trash. They like, look at this beautiful trash can. It's still trash. And Richard Brody ends the article talking about how like right wingers hate it.
Mm-hmm.
You're right. I do hate it.
And for me as a leftist, you know, my general kind of interpretation is when a right winger hates something, it's like, oh, this is probably okay. And so when they were like, oh, we hate this movie because there's pedophiles and all this stuff, my first thought process was, oh, this is part of this whole child sex ring conspiracy that right wingers are spewing, and it's not going to be that bad. And the movie is actually about a Somali girl coming of age story, or at least that's how they describe it.
That's how they want it to be.
That is not it at all, and I would agree with it. Yeah.
The summary of this movie is this. This young Somali girl named Ami, it's spelled Amy, is sort of coming in age, and she's sort of digressing from her family, who's naturally this traditional, I believe you said Muslim, I think it is Muslim.
Somali
Muslim. She's digressing, dissenting from this traditionalism to go rogue.
More modernism. It's more or less a girl from a traditional family tries to become like an ultra-sexualized dancer, because that's what we view a lot of modern things as.
And like, let's say this woman is 25, right? Let's say these women are 25. They're breaking away. It's a story. It would be a bad film. We could all agree on that, right?
I would say so.
But instead, we get this pedophile Footloose, and there's a debate on whether or not this is an acceptable movie.
And like, just ignoring the whole pedophile thing, which, you know,
we'll get to that.
Yeah. Another issue I have with it is like it's filmed in France. And France has had a lot of issues with the treatment of their Muslim culture. They have, you know, bans on a lot of Muslim aspects of their religion. And to me, this movie is just a poor double standard because it sexualizes kids. Even if that wasn't their intention, pedophiles are just attracted to it. And the other issue is it doesn't treat Muslims correctly. It looks down upon the religion, saying that this religion isn't good, and this girl needs to do something else because her religion is atrocious. And like, France has been known to be anti-Muslim, and so like I think on two sides of the issue, it's just a bad movie.
It feels like there's no real right answer. And another problem I had with the movie is, let's talk about an ending. And spoilers for Cuties if you're so inclined to watch it.
Yeah, skip like 2 minutes ahead.
The ending of the movie, this girl does not get punished at all for the actions of the film. And that lessens the message, right? That she can kind of do all this and nothing really comes of it in the end. But this movie is, they're dancers. And Carson said ultra-sexualized. That does not give the justice to how sexually charged this movie was. And I've seen people defend this movie as a cultural difference, right? The age of consent is 15 in France. The kids dancing in this movie are 11. And I would like to mention that they do dance moves that would freak me out if women did it. You know what I mean? And the biggest problem I have with this stupid film, there's two. First, it's shot. The way it is shot, and I mentioned this during the movie, and I see you laughing there.
There's a lot of ass scene.
The
Like
way
11-year-old
they,
ass.
move the camera is disgusting to me. And like, how does that, like, how do you get away with that? That very clearly seems like there's a pedophile who's filming this movie. And there's pedophilic, like, notions in the movie. Like, they get, again, spoilers for cuties, they get caught by these security guards, and it's, like, very heavily implied that one of these security guards is a pedophile. And they, like, let the girls go because they dance for them.
And then there was another scene where guys at the park walk up to him and asked how old they were. And they were like, oh,
19.
you know, we're 14, I'm 17, can we get your number? And the guys were like, sure. And then the one girl said, no, we're 11. And then they were like, oh, shit. And then they ran away.
And they look like they don't look like they look like they're 11.
Yeah.
They look like kids. It's not like it's disgusting to me. And my second thing that I hate about this movie isn't the movie itself, but the critics for this movie. The way they treat the people who dislike this movie, you heard the term holier than thou. You are the devil to these righteous progressives who love this movie. They see this movie and they go, this is brilliant. If you disagree with them, you're an idiot. One of them tweeted and said, the audience just needs to grow up. I think that the actresses in this movie need to grow up before they have a movie like this.
Yep.
And one thing I mentioned to you at the end, I was like, were there auditions for these roles? Because Netflix then, it just has like, oh god, it's just so implicative. All I'm saying is, and this is going to upset people, if you're a pedophile, you are living it up right now. It is so, it boggles my mind. And this is the first thing I mentioned, that this is a bad movie, I think. Everyone's like, the subtle messages. It's so subtle with it. Oh, it's devilization of social media. I think this is a bad movie through and through. Regardless, if like it was filmed like women, for instance, it would just be hated as a bad movie. But these are kids now, and there's debate. And it baffles my mind that this could get away with like this. And Ted Cruz suggested the idea of a legal investigation to this as child porn, and I am 1,000%, 10,000% on board with Ted Cruz.
Yeah, me too, and I'm the leftist.
Like, when Ted Cruz is on your back about child pornography, you're in a very strange spot.
Well, Ted Cruz has always been anti-porn. He tried to pass a law in Texas where you could only buy a certain number of dildos at one time.
What a guy. That man's a Christian.
For some reason, you know, buying 3 dildos is just, you know, excessive.
Too much. But, like, there's just so many things in this movie that I could go on about as its own separate topic as bad.
Mm-hmm.
Like, each scene is something different that is very clearly wrong and shouldn't be filmed. I don't want to mention any of it, obviously.
Uh-huh.
If you want to mention it, by all means, go for it. But I just think that it's disgusting that in this culture that is currently heating up with this MAP movement where we're not pedophiles, we're minor attracted persons, that this movie is heating up. This movie comes out and on the biggest streaming platform in the country, they suggest it to its viewers, number 1 on Netflix.
Mm-hmm.
What does that say? Like, here's my question. Who is this movie for? What is the intended audience for this movie?
Yes, because it's being recommended as number 1 in the country. Like, who's
this for?
Like, even just ignoring, like, the kind of, like, underlying issues with it, including the pedophilia and the possible issues with, like, Islamic culture. Like, one of the major issues that I see is it's just children acting. It's 11-year-olds who are doing a lot of these acting. If you are like a babysitter, or if you ever like had kids yourself, you know, spending like 2 hours trying to keep a group of like 5 or 6 like teenage girls, like it can be draining, you know, because they can go off on weird tangents and do a lot of weird things, you know. And, you know, me and Austin are both 20-something-year-old guys, you know, watching a group of 11-year-old girls just do anything for 2 hours.
Squinted eyes. I was like, this is disgusting.
Well, not even the disgusting part, but just watching any 11-year-old for 2 hours can get annoying.
To me. Yeah. I just, like, ugh.
It's just...
How does this, like, affect these girls in the future? Like, what about the parents of these girls that are like, yep, you can do this? Like, let's sign them up for this.
They sure had to sign off because there was one scene where there was nudity. Granted, it was not the children who were being nude. It was a legal adult. But the fact that there's a movie that is about coming of age for these, you know, 5 or 6 11-year-olds, and that there's a movie with nudity in it too, is something that definitely needed to be signed off on.
And so mentioning the coming of age story, again, bringing back to, like, this movie is for nobody. Like, there's no audience that this movie is meant for. Because when you say coming of age story, you're usually like, okay, well, that's for kids who are, like, just out of that coming of age thing, where they're like, they want to see other experiences. I would not show this to any kid under the age of any age. You could be 80 and I wouldn't recommend this movie to you.
And you know, as for the target audience, again, part of the story was about getting away from traditionalism. You know, depending on who you're showing it to in the Islamic culture, that's offensive. It's not meant for them. Is it meant for the French people because they don't like Islamic culture? Was it meant for pedophiles and this is just a cover-up? That's a question that needs answered.
It sounds like a conspiracy, like this movie was made by the deep state to enforce pedophilia in our culture. But when you think about this movie, like, it's so sexually charged that it loses a lot of the message that it would have. Like, the messages that it shows are, like, good messages, like, pedophiles are bad. Not a hot take. Over-sexualization of little girls is bad. Social media can lead to this over-sexualization. Traditionalism can drive younger people away from their families and such. It's just... Another big issue is how Netflix advertised this movie. In France, the poster was, there's a scene where the girls are, like, going over a bridge. And it's that scene. Like, there's nothing terribly wrong with that scene. But the Netflix, they saw it, they're like, let's glam it up. They had them in their over-sexualized costume, doing sexualized poses under spotlights, and it looks like this movie is supporting that. And that immediately turned a lot of people like, no, this is bad. And I was like, it's probably bad, but I want to watch it to make sure it's bad. And I didn't want to watch it alone, which is why I dragged you in. Mm-hmm. Because obviously, you get why I don't want to watch that movie alone.
Nobody should watch that movie alone.
I'm going to disagree with you on that. Nobody should watch that movie.
That's
no matter
true.
No matter how many people you have. Oh man, I hate to say that pedophiles are living it up, but they are.
Yep.
You figure, what's wrong with them? But I can't complain for much longer. I know we're running short on time. Well, I would love to keep going about how much I hate this movie. I could fill the runtime with my ranting on this movie. We do have to start packing up. We're nearing our time limit, both for the podcast and for our hosts. Yeah, our hosts are about to kick us out. We heard an announcement over the loudspeaker about it. Any last words for you regarding Ginsburg's passing?
Rest in peace.
Drones.
Be informed about drones. Be prepared to work from home, and
don't be a pedophile. Wow.
The lessons learned.
What a weird world where I have to be like, don't be a pedophile, kids, because it's not shown enough. What do you think? All right. And one last thing, I'm going to ask you this: you're a 13-year-old girl. You see this movie and you want to watch it. What do you think when you watch that movie?
I mean, honestly, like, it's just like you can get away with a lot of stuff. At the end of the movie, there was no repercussions for almost anything.
Yeah, and I feel like if you're like a little kid and you see this movie, that's going to drive you towards that lifestyle.
Well, that's what happened with the kids that were in the movie, is that they saw other kids do it and got drawn towards that lifestyle. of being over-sexualized and doing all this kinds of stuff, and
Now it's number one on Netflix.
now it's on Netflix, and that
You
can
can
be
watch
a
it
real-world consequence from the lesson that they are trying to teach.
Yep, but to finalize, don't be a pedophile. Don't be an NAP either.
And we will see you
Next
week.
Saturday.